Welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Bud Elliott. That's Danny Cannell. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and all across the 24/7 Sports Facebook network. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like, and come and join us in the chat. As you can see, those of you that are watching us live, we are going to be talking about dark horses for the upcoming season. And one thing that we will do, as the chat is already asking, is defining a dark horse. So don't worry, okay? We're going to set some parameters, and we have some selections both to win the national championship and also at every single power conference. You might want to go and grab a ticket because, once again, just to gloat on his behalf, Bud Elliott told you that TCU was a good dark horse pick to win the Big 12. No, they didn't do that, but they were a great pick. And man, you went into that Big 12 title game. You were holding a lot of good leverage opportunities to be able to go and make a Kansas State play. Right, Bud?
I actually listened to the clip last night, and this, I guess, is kind of gloating. If you let it play out, I'm like, if Oklahoma doesn't play to its talent level, I think you got to look at TCU. And then Kansas State was the other one. It's like probably a pretty good chance to get that. Yeah, that was fun. Like, it is kind of fun. And I think you have to define dark horse differently in each of these leagues. Like in some of these leagues, it's kind of like two teams or the field. And some of it's like four or the field, right? Yeah. So this will be fun.
There was absolutely a national title dark horse that I had a problem that was on the list of do not select. And we'll have to get to that when we get there.
Let's do it.
All right, good. Okay, before we get there.
Caesar's Odd Makers, you are on alert.
Let's go.
DK's got some issues.
A few recruiting notes. First of all, just the way that things are changing with the National Letter of Intent. The National Letter of Intent is going to lighten its penalties in the 2024-25 cycle. And one reason that I'm very glad to bring this up, even if we only need a couple of minutes, is that the foremost expert on telling you not to sign the National Letter of Intent is right here on the podcast. So Bud, what do you make in terms of the NCAA adjusting its process? And what do you think, what is the real world fallout in terms of how this changes the recruiting? And from what I understand, maybe the transfer rules as well.
Yeah. So this is something we've long called for, right? Like a school should not be able to try to hold you to a letter of intent if the guy you sign with, the head coach, leaves. So that's one of the major changes. You don't have to sit out a full year if you go through a certain amount of time on campus anymore. It's basically just an effort by the NLI to try to stay relevant as fewer and fewer kids who are elite level kids, right? Like if you're a dad or a mom of a player at home and your player is kind of like a 2-star recruit or like a fringe 3-star, I'd probably sign it because it gives you a little bit of a PR edge if the school tries to not honor it, right? Like, hey, we signed, you guys are not upholding your end of the bargain. If you're an elite kid, you really should not be signing a letter of intent because it does bind you, but doesn't really guarantee you anything. So from that standpoint, obviously I still would not sign if you're a really good player, but the new restrictions that are being lifted, I think are ultimately a good thing and an effort to try to stay relevant. I don't know how much longer we have an NLI in this sport. Like I think you may just go to a point where, all right, everybody just enrolls early now anyway. I mean, the majority of these kids are finishing up, at least at the top classes. They're going in early.
Can I ask a question? Who hasn't signed an NLI in recent years? Like, did Arch Manning sign one, or was he of that category where he didn't? Or is it a select few, or is it a growing number?
Well, a lot of kids who enroll early don't sign at all, right? They just enroll, or they'll sign financial aid papers, and you can sign financial aid papers with a lot of schools. So, guys who have not signed, I think the most notable one who took it like the entire distance was Roquan Smith, right? And he was going to go to UCLA, did not go to UCLA. They had coaching changes. I think Jim Mora was either in or out or something like that, or there's some kind of rumors. He smartly just said, look, man, I'm good enough. I know my rights as a player and I know my market value. I'll just enroll in the summer after I get to see what happens in this offseason. And Roquan was right. And obviously, kind of finessed his way to a really good deal in the NFL as well. Clowney waited a long time.
JTT at Ohio State.
Yeah, JTT. Pryor as well. I think Terrell Pryor waited, if I'm not mistaken there. But nowadays, it's not as big of a deal because guys just enroll in January, so that they're not delaying their enrollment to August. Very few of them are actually enrolling in August among the elite players.
You are not going to have a penalty if you request a release as a result of a head coaching change. Is that enough? I mean, it seems to me like if assistants are the ones that recruit you, they're the ones you establish a relationship with. Assistants are the ones that we see shuffle even more than head coaches do, especially in that big wave right after these signing days. And that's where on the human level, I'm like, oh, that stinks, because you might not have even talked to the head coach that much. You thought that this was going to be your guy, but could you even from like the sports standpoint be able to release everybody from assistant coaches? Like, would that be going too far, you think?
I've always proposed you name 4 coaches, right? Head coach, area recruiter, the coordinator on the side of the ball that you agree that you're going to play with the school. Like, obviously, like just you and the school need to agree on the form, and a position coach. If a strength coach leaves or like a DB coach, but you have to play offensive line, no. But if it's your area recruiter, position coach, coordinator on the side of the ball that you play, or the head coach, I think those are substantial enough relationships you should be able to get out scot-free.
Totally agree. And I think back to when I was recruited, there were kind of a top 3 schools that kind of developed. It was Florida State, and I talked to Coach Bowden a handful of times, but I talked to Mark Richt, on a weekly basis. Hey, how you doing? I developed that relationship with him. When it was Michigan, it was Cam Cameron at the time. He was the quarterback coach. Talked to Gary Moeller maybe twice, but he was calling me all the time, and I really liked him. That was the guy I was going to be working with. The thing that was interesting about Florida, Spurrier, I talked to some, but Charlie Strong, who was a defensive guy, was my area recruiter, but I really liked him and developed a really good relationship with him. So I think that's why it is important, because some schools, if it's a school out west, they might just not have their quarterback coach, work the Southeast. They might have somebody who's more geared, that's familiar with that territory. So that's why I think it's really important you put in that area recruiter, because they'll develop a relationship with a guy who has nothing to do with his position whatsoever.
Man, that's such a good idea.
I do. So, Bud, when you say 4, do you have to declare them ahead of time, or is it just it's a written in stone? Because I do think if you said, hey, if assistants leave, it would be a loophole that people would take advantage of, and you start hearing guys, well, because you talk to every coach, you'd be like, yeah, well, that guy recruited me, and then you could have it as a loophole where guys would take advantage of it.
I think you and the school should just be able to agree, right? Like if you're signing to go to the school, you probably have a pretty good relationship with them. And like, there shouldn't be any real guesswork on who the 4, but 2 of the 4 are pretty automatic, unless you're like, I don't know what position I'm going to play. At that point, it's kind of
24/7 Sports tells us a primary and a secondary for a lot of these guys. Like they're able to identify who the coaches are. And sometimes, like you mentioned, it's not even that side of the ball. It might be the area recruiter side of this.
Yeah, exactly right. I don't think it needs to be that hard. Just put the 4 on the form, and I don't really like any kind of restrictions on guys who aren't employees, but if you're going to have them, at least have them be reasonably tied to the influence that got the player to sign with the school.
Did you guys hear Mac Brown on Feinbaum?
He's been talking a lot.
He said within 2 years, he thinks players are going to be employees. That's the first time I've heard somebody that aggressively come out with a timeline. And like, I think they're all getting on board because they realize we have to. They want to be ahead of it. They don't want to be the person that's fighting it. And I love Mac, but I think he's also like the godfather of the college football, coaching circles. I think he knows this as well. But to put 2 years on it, I think that was very interesting. And that to me is the biggest concern for the ACC. When you do go to that model, that's when things get really dicey as far as it's your future and your ability to compete with the SEC and Big Ten, because they'll have deeper coffers. The only thing that was weird about it when he said it, he said, he's like, I don't know how it works. Is it the collectives are funded through the school? Like, he didn't mention the TV side, the TV money. He was like, is there a salary cap that comes through the various collectives?
Yeah, I've heard him talk about salary caps, but there's something else that Mac has been saying that I do think is very important. And we have so many conversations, minutes and hours spent on the health of the sport, good of the sport, this, that, or the other. But one thing that he has identified that I am totally on board of is we are asking too much from our fans and from our boosters and our donors. We're asking you to give to the school. We're asking you to give to the athletic department. And now we're asking you to give to the collective as well. The price of the tickets are continuing to go up as we create all these different opportunities. We cannot ask for the time, the money, the investment, the donations, and to continue to ask more and more and more and put the onus of paying players on them. And to your point, Danny, like when he is out here, that seems like he's looking out for people enjoying, and he's probably hearing from donors that are like, look, who do I give money to? I don't even know anymore. And that's not a functional financial system to be able to support the players moving forward.
I see a lot of this stuff on Twitter, like, how will these collectives survive? And I'm like, who says they have to survive in the long term? We had Matt Brown and a couple other legal experts on the show, and they felt not the 2-year time span that Mac Brown gave, but within a half decade, they thought it was very likely players would be paid as employees. Until I see actual like evidence otherwise, I kind of think a lot of these collectives as, Band-Aid for where we're at right now that are not intended to last for 10 or 20 years. I mean, like maybe Spire becomes like a great marketing agency or something like that and expands beyond just Tennessee, but don't they seem like kind of like pass-throughs right now until these guys become employees?
And the schools are like, please give to us again. Stop.
Yeah.
You've stopped your donations to us, and now they are going to the collectives.
Yeah.
Oh no. Danny frozen. It's a good face.
I think Danny is. That's a good like on the frozen face scale. I mean, Danny, that's pretty good, man.
All right.
I'm back. I don't know. Hotel Wi-Fi seems a little dicey early in the show. So
Danny didn't pay for the upgrade. Come on, Silverstein.
Sorry, Danny, you got anything else on that?
I don't want to go down a whole rabbit hole, but I do think it's interesting because if you mentioned the legal guys said that we'll get to that, that area, is that money coming from the TV deals directly? And if we do have a pro salary cap, do you still think teams will use boosters, donors, collectives to go above and beyond that salary cap? Like, I think my mind, I'm thinking, oh, great, salary cap. That means parity. But I don't know if it necessarily does, because I think you still have endorsement deals, and they'll be more like marketing deals. Just like people, play, hey, when you play in New York, there's an opportunity to make more money. So free agents, want to go play in a big city market. I think there'll still be ways to lure the top players, even in a salary cap world.
Danny, what year did the 49ers circumvent the salary cap? Remember that? It was a pretty big thing. I know it was early 90s. Maybe late 90s. Ultimately, the extent to which teams go outside the salary cap will be controlled by like the absolute amount of donations that come in, and then B, what the prospective penalties are if you get caught, right? Like, we don't hear about NFL teams going outside the salary cap anymore because the 49ers got slapped pretty good in whatever year that was. My guess here is they probably won't to a huge extent, assuming that the players are getting paid what they are and that the penalties are a lot. I also think it makes more sense for these guys to be employed by the conferences, not the schools, so that they're not subject to Title IX, but rather to Title VII, right? Which is a lot less stringent of a law to comply with, because that's employment as opposed to Title IX, which is the equity one.
Bud Elliott Esquire. We will dive into that one in another show.
Sorry.
We got actual football to talk about. But I did, before we hit the break, wanted to ask, because June is winding down right now. July 1, a lot of teams are moving. Want to talk about that tomorrow as part of our mailbag. But June is such a massive, massive month for recruiting the upcoming cycle, which of course would be the 2024 cycle. So just, from everything that you've gathered, obviously you've been on the road, you've been talking to a lot of guys. 24/7 Sports is just does phenomenal work on this front. What do you think who are some of the big winners that you've noticed in terms of teams and staffs that have improved their position from where we were at the beginning of the month to where we are heading into July?
Yeah, so I would say both Ohio State and Michigan have had a really, really strong Junes. Ohio State's sitting at number 2 right now, 16 commits overall, 2 5-stars, 12 4-stars. Like that's an awesome start. Michigan as well has been picking up a lot of top players, 14 blue chips in the class already. I'm going to go Florida here, right? Like, they're up to number 4 in the rankings. They've had 2 really good weeks, and I think it was important. Like, you lose Simmons to Ole Miss, and then Billy Napier's like, watch this. Let's get some momentum going. And I already see in the chat, they're going to be like, okay, well, Florida's going to lose all these kids because their over-under win total is 5.5. And I get that. In theory, if Vegas is right, will they lose some of these kids? Probably, but probably not all of them. And what if Vegas is wrong? What if Florida is able to have some good close game luck and plays a lot of like drag you in the muck type games and is able to go 8-4? Then you had that recruiting momentum from the summer. You can show tangible improvement in the win column, and maybe you can actually build upon that class. So I think Florida is another one to look out here. And then if you're going to mention Florida, let's stay in their own division. Georgia is still on track to have the best recruiting class of all time. So there is that. And their number 1 overall quarterback looked like the number 1 overall player in the country at Elite 11. So.
But
yeah.
I did a deep dive on your Georgia won a title in the rebuilding year take. It's scary.
I know.
It's really terrifying. Yeah, we'll see. Coming up on the other side, we're not talking about Georgia. No. We got to go deeper. We're identifying dark horse candidates for 2023 at the national championship and conference championship levels. All that and more next.
Said I'm fired up. I'm sorry your time's up. I see the time up. Came from the ashes, I rise up.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast. Very fun show we like to do during the off season. Sort of, whet your appetite as we prepare to get through win totals beginning in July. We get all of our championship picks, our expert picks. I mean, it is just a downhill sprint once we turn the calendar. So let's go ahead and get it started with dark horse candidates for 2023. So the line that has been drawn, and Danny already has taken issue with this. So for the dark horse national championship picks for today's show, we say no Georgia, no Ohio State, no Alabama, no Michigan, no USC, no LSU, no Clemson, no Florida State, no Texas, no Penn State. Danny, who is on that list that you think should qualify as a dark horse?
Well, see, since there weren't any rules set forth in the doc that I was able to peruse, I just assumed. I wrote down, I was actually putting in the chat, I said Penn State, dark horse for the national championship. And then I looked on the list, and I was like, wait a second. I'm like, let me double check, make sure they're not. Oh, wait a second. I can't pick them. I think if you haven't had a national title in 30 years, you should be a dark horse in any list to win a national championship. I get they're a trendy pick this year, and our buddy Tom has been all over them. I'm finding myself maybe gravitating. Obviously, if I was willing to take them as a dark horse, but I still think they are an outside shot for the national championship. It could be and should be considered a dark horse.
So let me ask you a question on this. Is Danny really mad about this, or is Danny mad because he got in the dock third and Chip and I had already made their pick? So he had the last pick on all these because Chip and I got. But let's put it to a vote of the chat, right? Like, what I did was I grabbed the top 10 odds for the national title on Caesars. I was like, all right, everybody outside of this, but Penn State's odds are kind of long. They're third in their own division, right? So, chat, should Danny be allowed to pick Penn State as his national title dark horse? What do we think?
I already see several. DK is right.
Yeah.
Except for
Yosef,
Broden, whatever
Robert.
Braden is.
So do we agree that let's go with everybody right there on the cut line? Do we agree that Florida State does not count as a national championship dark horse? It's not one I would pick, but if you're going to include them, I think I understand.
It's kind of like, how much do you respect the marketplace, right? I guess they are a really trendy pick to make the playoff. Like,
correct.
There's a big disparity between their make the playoff odds and win the playoff odds, which I think tells you like path is a big part of it, right?
And then Texas mathematically should absolutely be there. That's what makes it fun about, like, if you were to say Texas is a dark horse, it's less fun because it'd be more fun to bet that Texas has no chance, right? Again, for you to be jumping on the other side of it. Again, not a position that I found myself in here at the end of June. All right, we're seeing a lot of yes. All right, Danny. So give me more about
Penn State, Danny. Let's go.
Or do you want me to go with my written? Or do you want me to go with my backup plan? I'll give
Chad says yes.
I'll go with both because I do think they're a team that has the roster makeup. I think the defense has been great. I think Manny Diaz has been awesome as a pickup for them. Maybe a guy that's better suited in that role as a coordinator than a head coach. But the big difference maker for me is look what they did with Sean Clifford, who was a Jag plus at best at quarterback. Now this is assuming Drew Aller is that guy that comes in, elevates this team, takes them to a next level. They were already close. They've been close. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they were that team from the Big Ten that could be the last one standing.
I agree. I mean, like, I don't love their matchup with Michigan just because Michigan kind of bullied them on the inside, and not really sure Penn State's like interior D line is great. But if they can manage to pull that game off, they've played with Ohio State pretty well. It's not hard to win, or not easy to win there in Columbus. But yeah, that one makes a lot of sense.
Makes a way more sense than Oregon.
All right, so here's my take on Oregon. What'd we do for the last 2 years? We looked at Stetson Bennett, and we were like, he's not that great. Like, he's not that good. And then all of a sudden, what has he done? He's won back-to-back national titles. I feel like Bo Nix, I'm in the same position. I'm with Stetson Bennett. Like all of a sudden you look at his numbers and we all are like, what on our QB draft that we did, our QB rankings, none of us had him on there. And we're all like, probably put him on the do not draft list. If he comes back and puts up numbers like he did this past season and builds on it, and Dan Lanning gets that defense a little bit closer to where they are, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility at all to see them have a special type season. Now, the depth of the Pac-12 definitely becomes an issue, especially the top. I think ultimately they'll probably cannibalize each other, but maybe that happens across the board. And there is a 2-loss Pac-12 champion that possibly could get in. If they're in, I think you could see one of those anything could happen type scenarios.
I'm a little concerned about defensively and sort of like the depth of skill position talents around Bo Nix, but he can be an all Mr. Everything. And also the funny thing about Oregon is, like, negative, you lose Kenny Dillingham, but positive, we really like the replacement hire of being able to bring in Will Stein from UTSA. So, some balance there with the Ducks. All right, Bud, where are you going?
This might surprise some people on Twitter, but I'm actually going to go with Notre Dame.
Where are you at, Michael Campbell? In the house. Let's go.
Oh, I saw Michael Campbell got the band hammer from Nada last episode, but I don't know if that's like a one show or if he just popped off and did something that we're going to have to give him a couple show timeout for. Look, I think Notre Dame has some serious long tails on both sides of their projection. Okay. Like, do we know if Marcus Freeman can be a head coach? Not really. He had some real struggles last year. I don't know if he can manage a program. Recruiting is up somewhat under him. They go out and make a big time upgrade at quarterback. Another unknown. Like, can Sam Hartman unlock yet another level outside of that Wake Forest system? And I know Wake fans save it. I know he's not all about the slow mesh, but there's certainly a portion of his production, that is accounted for by the slow mesh. Now, offensive line, I think that is a knowable. Like, we know that's a damn good offensive line. Like, they do a really good job. Running back's okay, I think. And receiver, I didn't like the receivers last year. The coaches I talked to didn't either. Maybe they had some good games that, other coaches would disagree with me. Who knows? I think they can take a big step up this year. And I really like what they have on the back end. I mean, Morrison and Hart is a really nice corner combo. So, yeah, man, like, if Notre Dame plays to its absolute ceiling, like if Marcus Freeman checks the box, yeah, I can be a head coach, not just a D coordinator, right? I know how to manage games better. Yes, I think that their offensive coordinator hire is very concerning. Doesn't mean it won't work out, but they clearly struck out on the guys they really wanted, and I think they cheaped out and went in-house. But there's still a possibility that their ceiling is high enough that if everything clicks for Notre Dame and their front seven is a little bit better than I think, that possibly they could take it home. This is a tough exercise, man.
Listen.
It is.
Do you want to hear the slow mesh? This is the other side of it. Going through and getting the advanced analytics that show how Sam Hartman's numbers improve when he throws from a clean pocket, and arguing that the slow mesh actually hurt Sam Hartman because he always had to throw from a muddy pocket. And that with the increase in offensive line that we are projecting and that I agree with, that Sam Hartman will actually be better. Not agreeing. I'm just giving you the full deep Notre Dame, like talking yourself into this, be like, I know that he has the record for ACC passing touchdowns, but he's actually going to be better with us here at Notre Dame. This is going to unlock the real Sam Hartman.
Do you want to hear the opposite side of that? Because I talked to Les Johns of Demon Deacon Digest 24/7, and he was like, I'm not worried about replacing Sam Hartman. He's like, Warren Ruggiero, this offense has been great no matter who's been calling the shots. Like, I don't expect much drop off. So there's both sides of the coin there. I think the bigger issue is, did Sam Hartman go to Notre Dame to play for Tommy Rees? Like we were talking about that with some younger guys that sign, and what kind of an issue is that going to be replacing, their offensive coordinator?
It sounds like Notre Dame took care of Sam Hartman pretty well. I think he would have gone to Notre Dame to play for like me or you. Is kind of starting that professional career early.
Hey,
so
our boy BQ says 0.
What?
0 NIL. I just don't believe it. Exactly. I'm with you guys.
Okay.
I don't know.
Oh, there were a lot of zeros. I'm sorry. You missed
zeros. Yeah.
Maybe that was early in the cup. He had already
Stuff.
committed. He had already done. It was already a done deal. He's like, no. He just wants to come play for the Irish.
When I'm looking for my dark horse, I want volatility. Give me Texas A&M. like the total boomer bust. Like if Bobby Petrino works and this offense takes off, this is where we get to like the overly simplistic view of winning a national championship. Not that blue chip ratio is simplistic, but just like talent. That the talent that has come into College Station over the last 3 to 4 years suggests that when it comes to getting to the college football playoff and having to go win 2 games against the best teams in the country, there's no flaws. Well, there might be flaws on the sideline. There might be flaws in some of the ways that things are approached, but the raw talent of this team, I think, is undeniable. And so when you want to look for those longer odds, like take that Texas A&M ticket because you're going to have a better payout than you're going to get from anybody else in the SEC. And then all of a sudden, you got a little bit of value if they are able to make it to the college football playoff. You want to go to the SEC?
Let's do it.
Do you want to expand on that? You said you had Texas A&M as your SEC dark horse. Was they putting a ceiling on that? You would not take them for national title?
No, I just the more I considered Notre Dame, was like I could see this because there's a path there as well. Like if Notre Dame plays to its ceiling, it's only an underdog once, I think, probably, right? And they played Clemson well last year, so like the path for the Irish is challenging at times, right? You got to go to Clemson, you got to play Ohio State, but if they're at their ceiling, they're not going to struggle with like a Navy, Duke, Stanford certainly is one of their road games, which is not difficult. So A&M was kind of my other choice here. Like you got to pick a team that you really think can bang if they get to those final 2 games. And I like the Irish's offensive line.
All right, Danny, where are you going with this one?
SEC, I would have gone Texas A&M, but I didn't want to make it a clean sweep. And I saw, Tennessee, I think, is that team that if they build on what they did last year, if their defense gets better, I mean, their pass defense was one of the worst in the country. If they could just get incrementally better, and Joe Milton is a success in a system which has been very quarterback friendly. I mean, so much so that it gets criticized for, and quarterbacks get knocked for playing of it. If Milton just plays within the system, makes good decisions, orchestrates that offense, I think they'll be able to once again replace some of the receivers they've lost. I mean, it's more of the system that we've talked about. And I also think there is a chance they could be that team that, possibly loses to Alabama on the road. But if they get Georgia on a down day, in one of Georgia's biggest tests of the year, maybe the only big test, where for whoever's, if it's Carson Beck, whoever, we're not really going to know what they're all about if they're playing from leads and playing in, games that aren't that hostile. This will be a crazy environment. You never know what could happen in that one.
To throw it back to our Monday show, right? Discussion of like the different ways to rank strength of schedule. Tennessee has a harder win a national title schedule than A&M does because you have to face Georgia and Bama.
And maybe twice.
Right, exactly. A&M has a harder make a bowl schedule because the rest of the West is better than the rest of the East that A&M and Tennessee have to face respectively. And obviously A&M has the Miami game in the non-conference, which they should win, but it's probably not a lock. I think Tennessee, their ceiling is pretty interesting. Like if they get like peak Milton and they get him to be accurate, that creates a really difficult thing to defend for opposing defenses. And maybe Tennessee can step up its defense just a little bit this year.
Brandon Marcello got to talk with a group called the Matrix Analytical, who put together a coach ranking system. It's a formula, and he revealed the top 10 on 24/7 Sports in a column, and Josh Heupel was in the top 10. I don't want to question the math because I'm not going to look under the hood on that one, but I just did that. Does that feel right to you? Josh Heupel is a top 10 coach in college football right now?
Can we look under the hood? Like, do they show their work?
We were revealed a scores and a stars in the article, like a 93 point something and stars, either 4 or 5. The 5 stars were Nick Saban and Kirby Smart, 1 and 2 respectively. So that's like, where is there a path to Josh Heupel top 10 coach as we sit right now?
I mean, I don't think he recruited well at UCF, and he comes to Tennessee, all of a sudden he's a good recruiter. So like the polo shirt and the money behind the polo shirt matters a lot for that purpose. I think the guy's good, like a good offensive coach. We don't know if he can run a good defense yet. We'll see.
I'm trying to go through the top 10 real quick to like see, all right, who's getting offended here, or who am I leaving out? Who's behind him?
Right.
But I think he absolutely can play himself. Another solid year. I mean, even if they're 10-2 this season, they lose to both Alabama and Georgia. I think that might alone put him in that conversation.
I think that Josh Heupel is a functional coach where you have a set of expectations that have been exceeded for a season. And if he does it again,
right,
then we adjust our expectations, and I entertain those conversations with a little bit more credence, I guess would be the word.
Is it kind of similar to Mike Norvell? Like if Mike Norvell was on there, we're like, ooh, is he top 10? But you'd want to see one more year,
yes,
proving it.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Guy can score points, did well at the G5 level. Recruiting seems to be improving, not an elite level yet, and
New Year's Six
has
Bowl.
not had good defenses yet. So, yeah, I think they're very similar.
Success-starved fan base and program trying to lead them back to the top of the sport. No, that's actually a great, pair them together just sort of in the way we look at the 2023 season. And I believe, doesn't Tennessee play Texas A&M this year?
Yes,
they get
at home.
I thought they get Mississippi State from the West.
No, they play A&M home too.
Okay.
October 14th.
Georgia, Alabama, and A&M. Big disconnect between me being like, oh, yeah, like Tennessee, they're right there. And then
just under that scenario, you could see the combustible mix of Bobby Petrino and Jimbo Fisher like falling apart at the seams. Right. It's like, yeah, they might be a 10-point favorite in that scenario.
That's 100% true. All right, let's go ahead and hit the break here. Coming up on the other side, we continue our conference by conference dark horse selection. So if you are trying to pick a team in the ACC, you can't have Clemson or Florida State. If you're trying to pick a team in the Big Ten, no Ohio State, Michigan, or Penn State. In the Big 12, no Texas, Oklahoma, or Kansas State. In the Pac-12, no USC, Utah, or Oregon. So with all those off the board, who are our dark horse picks for those conferences? Next.
You gonna start the engine sometime soon, Erica?
Do you know the odds of all of us being here at this time? It's improbable, and yet here we are, together.
Hold on to your saddles.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, we've got Nada riding alongside with us, Kanata Edwards from the Eye on College Basketball podcast, the Pick 6 podcast. We love being able to work with him. This comes with the absence of Jordan, as Robert Michael in the chat asked if Jordan authored the article that had Josh Heupel as a top 10 coach. No, Jordan is in his first days of fatherhood. We got the heads up on Monday evening that his son was born. So congratulations to Jordan, and send much love his way. Their family spending some quality time together. So congratulations to him for sure. Was it a Monday?
Awesome.
Monday
good
night?
Looking baby too.
No doubt.
Paul.
Yeah. I keep trying to talk my wife into having one more. So I'm like showing her the picture. It's like, look how cute this baby is.
Yeah. And the baby's very, very cute. Yeah. I'll let Jordan decide if he wants to let the baby's Christian name get out here in public. I don't want the identity stolen at 1 week old.
What are the odds on DK getting a fourth?
Oh, less than 1. She's in control of this one.
That's the ultimate dark horse.
Dark horse.
That is the ultimate dark horse for sure.
All right, back to our dark horse conversation. If in the ACC, no Clemson, no Florida State. Danny, why don't you get us started? Where are you going?
I went with the Miami Hurricanes. I think Mario Cristobal year 2, you could see some of those guys that weren't necessarily bought in. You could see them weeded out. Also, maybe we return to the form of Tyler Van Dyke that we saw from his freshman year. I was very concerned about the Josh Gaddis hire in the first place, as far as where exactly that stood. And I think that with Shannon Dawson coming in, maybe you get him to return to form. And I still think that the roster talent can compete with almost anybody in the ACC. I mean, when we did our secondary selections, looking at their safeties, they got studs all across the board in the back end. I say, why wouldn't it be the Hurricanes?
I think you have to have, I'm glad one of the 3 picked him, because talent-wise, they do have a lot of athleticism on that team. Some stuff I picked up from the weekend at Future 50. They feel great about Matt Lee, the transfer center they took from UCF. and think he could be the best center in the league. And he was a really good center for UCF, so that's not entirely shocking. I'm trying to think, like, rack my brain about other top centers in the league. Like, none stand out. Carolina took one from Coastal, I think. So I'm going to go Louisville here because they don't play any of the teams on our can't pick them list. No Clemson, no Florida State, and no North Carolina. Jeff Brom had better win some ball games this year because it all comes back around next year. Like, next year, Clemson's on the schedule, Florida State's on the schedule, North Carolina's on the schedule. I mean, I guess we'll see how good UNC is in 24 without Drake May, but this is an extremely winnable schedule for Jeff Brom. They took Jack Plummer, who knows the system, back from Cal. I mean, this is a team I bet a little bit at I think 18 and 15 to 1 for the league just because of the path, right? They might be the 5th or 6th best team in the league, but they have one of the more favorable paths to actually reach the game.
3 is the number of true road games that Louisville plays across its entire 2023 schedule. That would be at NC State, at Pitt, and at Miami, because the Georgia Tech game is neutral, as it's going to be in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium there on September 1st. They play against Indiana, but it's neutral in Lucas Oil Fieldhouse. Like, there is such a nice sort of belly of Virginia at home, Virginia Tech at home, Boston College at home. Just like show up and get the job done. And, toughest game on the schedule, in my opinion, which is against Notre Dame. That's not going to count for your conference schedule. We are talking about conference championship dark horses. Louisville with a lot of new faces on board. I'll wait with the knee. Go ahead.
Jack Plummer too. He can play. At Cal on a bad team, he went toe-to-toe with Caleb Williams. He went toe-to-toe with Michael Penix. Like, he had a pretty good year last season, and he knows the system, like you mentioned. So I think he'd come in. He would be one of those guys too that the NFL scouts. I mean, he's got the body type, the physicality, the athleticism. He's a really good quarterback. So I like that pick, bud.
There's some North Texas 2022 vibes here where, a couple of us took North Texas last year at long odds and with the plan to hedge it, because their chance to make the title game in their league because of the disparate schedules was pretty good. But you knew they would be a big dog or a decent sized dog, even assuming that they're playing like kind of towards their ceiling to make it. Obviously, like, you can't play terrible and make it. But North Texas was probably the 4th or 5th best team in CUSA last year, yet they made the title game. It does happen.
Getting to the championship and lining up against Clemson or Florida State after avoiding them all year would be a little bit difficult. I'm going to go with North Carolina here. It is very much, it's Drake May, but seriously, like the consideration of North Carolina, and especially when we look at, what the Tar Heels are going to have to do, they are going to have to be some road warriors, like the way that their schedule breaks down. As they do have late in the season, they got to go at Clemson and at NC State in November, all at the end of the year. They've got a tough road trip at Pitt for their conference opener, but they went 6-0 in true road games last season, playing away from the soft baby blue, beautiful trees all around Kenan Stadium. Maybe that gave the Tar Heels a hard edge, and they're going to have to get it done. We talk about them a lot, just sort of in-house, but Devontae Walker coming in from Kent State. Everyone around Chapel Hill says the dude's going to be like a total difference maker, be able to step right in and take over, not Josh Downs' role, but certainly a lot of that production is going to end up going Walker's way. Nate McCollum, a transfer from Georgia Tech as well. Loaded running back room, but I know you did you just recently recorded the summer school with Adam Smith of Inside Carolina. I think they're the 3rd best team in the ACC. And if they can get it done in the right spots, then they could find themselves contending for a spot in Charlotte for sure.
The weakness on this team offensively appears to be offensive line, I guess, potentially, or at least offensive line depth. But how many good D lines do they play? South Carolina's not a good D line. Minnesota's okay. Like, at Pitt will probably be a game that the O-line needs to buck up. Miami is a theoretically good defensive line, but not in practice last year, so we'll see. Clemson, legitimately a good D-line, and maybe at NC State, I guess. So they should just be able to outscore everybody. Chip, do you think the defense can take a jump with second year under the new DC and maybe some different secondary coaching and a whole lot of transfers in the secondary? it's hard to be worse. Like they didn't take any defensive jump last year, really.
Right. I'm not expecting a lot from the defense. That's where you really get down to you're asking for timely stops, like just enough to be able to get through. Do you remember the North Carolina Miami game in about the middle of the season? I think it ended up being about 28-24, but Tyler Van Dyke was cooking in that game. He was moving the ball well, but North Carolina's defense was able to bow up and get enough stops, actually held a team under 25 points per game. And that was good because North Carolina's offense wasn't lighting the world on fire in that spot either. So that's kind of like the spot where I circle from North Carolina's defense, where like they were bad. They were absolutely bad. But if there's a blueprint for being able to play well enough to win, that game at Miami might be part of it, I think. All right, let's turn our attention to the Big Ten. We have eliminated Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State from consideration. Speaking of 25 points per game, Bud, we
All right.
it?
Another like path plus competency plus I'm betting on maybe them no longer being incompetent on offense. We'll look. I'm relatively confident I will play good defense again. It's a really hard to pick a team from the West because like Iowa would be, I think, be at best the fourth best team in the East and maybe the fifth, right? Depending on what you think of Maryland, I guess. But look who they play from the East. It's at Penn State, and I don't see Michigan, and I don't see Ohio State. So they have the path to get there. And if you're going to play these low-scoring slugfests, occasionally just jack the variance up because there's like 30 total points scored in the game between both teams. Maybe you can pull one out. This is a really tough one. I don't think any of these teams can actually beat whatever team comes out of the East.
Wisconsin, right, Danny?
Love it. This might be my favorite one of all of them. I think they're the most. There's a lot of similarities between TCU and what they did and what Wisconsin could potentially do this year. You look going from a defensive coach who was a fixture there for a while, and they had pretty decent success. I know it kind of fell apart, but then you completely go the opposite, personality, everything, with an offensive coach and Sonny Dykes. You see the turnaround, you see the buy-in and the culture, and the players get excited. They kind of get hot. I think Fickell coming into Wisconsin was one of the sneaky best hires. I also thought him bringing in an offensive mind, and he's going to say, hey, you go ahead and take your side of the ball. I'll take my side of the ball. I don't think he's going to have his hands over there trying to say, hey, we need to run it at this times. And I think Tanner Mordecai, with the experience he has, that's kind of the one, unknown. I know he's played a lot. The spring game wasn't great, but I'm going to go ahead and trust him that he orchestrates this offense. They got a heck of a running back, too, that you could also fall back on as well in case they're not throwing the ball as great as they want to.
That's what I was thinking. Like the decision to hand the ball off to Braylon Allen is just putting the ball in your best player's hands. And when Phil Longo, the new offensive coordinator at Wisconsin, had Michael Carter and Javonte Williams, two future NFL running backs in the same running back room, do you know what he did with that offense? He ran the ball. They were like each 1,000-yard rushers that season. So even though you're still operating with some more, spread it out, modern concepts, a lot of work out of the gun, a lot of work with tempo, you're still going to be able to find a way to run the ball. Wisconsin still has the big bodies on the offensive line to be able to push you around. And I'm going to believe that the defensive roster and depth chart that Luke Fickell inherited, he looks at it and he's like, man, upgrade. Like I'm still a really good coach, and this is an upgrade. Wisconsin was my pick as well. All right.
I think too, the energy level is going to be so much amped up from where it was. And it's not I like Paul Chryst. He's a great guy, but he's not Luke Fickell, right? Not the energy that he's going to bring to the table.
Anybody else that y'all considered since we got two Wisconsin?
Did anybody consider Minnesota?
No, I would consider.
No, hard nose, huh?
I just think they're kind of a transition, maintain the gains type. Like maybe Kaliak Manis, the Greek rifle, as they're calling him. Maybe he arrives a year early, but I don't think they're on that level. They also doesn't Minnesota and Purdue, don't they have the real tough draw this year where they have to play two of the big three from the East?
Yes, that's why. As soon as I looked at that, I took them off. I was considering them and then took
We
them off.
both-
And
we
on
had-
the road.
We had Minnesota and Purdue mentioned in our toughest schedules in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
So that's a draw, and I'm not ready to buy in on quarterback quite yet. I mean, I think Purdue's got a better quarterback situation. Hudson Card's a good player.
Mhm.
They're also at Iowa. Minnesota is. So
Minnesota
that's kind of tough.
All right, in the Big 12, we got 3 different picks here. Danny, why don't you get us started?
I can't believe this is allowed to be a dark horse when you got the team that just made the playoff coming back and building and having the quarterback that actually was the starter to start the season last year in Chandler Morris. And I think they've still got an offensive mind and Kendall Briles that will be, I think it'll look a little bit different, but I don't think you'll see much drop off there. And I also think maybe we talked about the development of what they got. I think they hit the transfer portal again pretty decently. I think they'll be able to build on some of that success from last year. Again, dark horse from the philosophy here. I said, why not TCU? And I didn't want to take who you guys already had as well.
Yeah, the number 118 team in returning production, the TCU Horned Frogs. Some plug and play. You got some transfers in there, but
Bill Connolly's his SP Plus. He was pretty high on him. He had him projected, I think, as a 9-3.
I think they'll be a good ball club again. I mean, they definitely have some defensive line concerns. I'm trying to think back to what the summer schools said. I don't know. I could see TCU. The 3 we were not allowed to pick here: Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas State, per the odds makers. Like theoretical potential is doing a lot of work in the Big 12. Like the favorites in the Big 12 are like the least proven teams out of all these things.
Because TCU and Kansas State are ones that you look at and you're like, hey, like you were the ones that were just there.
Yeah, like Kansas State makes sense. They won the league. They return a ton on offense, with the exception of Deuce Vaughn. Their whole line's back. They should be pretty decent on defense. Oklahoma and Texas, I think, are there in the odds because their ceilings are higher than everybody else. Whether they'll hit their ceilings, very much up for debate.
But what did you learn in the last 6 weeks that has had you higher on Oklahoma State? Something's changed in the tone of your voice and in the way the wind's blowing.
Look, they lost a lot of known commodities at transfer.
Yes.
But I do think that some of the transfers Oklahoma State took are decent players and can play a little bit of ball. And I look at their schedule and I like it. So at Iowa State early, I have Oklahoma State favored there. They host Kansas State. They host Kansas. So you got them 2-1 at West Virginia. I think Oklahoma State's a better team than the Mountaineers. Cincinnati, I've got them favored over Cincinnati. They got Oklahoma at home. Look, if it's the Oklahoma team from last year, that's a beatable team. If Oklahoma plays much better, which they could, then they'll probably lose that ball game. At UCF, at Houston, BYU. And now I'm done with the schedule. No Texas, no TCU, no Texas Tech. I mean, I like this slate. Only 4 conference road games, and you're avoiding three of my top 5.
17 returning starters, 15 super seniors. Yeah, we still got super seniors out here swimming in the pool. Give me Texas Tech. Give me shocker. Your boy is out here really liking vibes, but the vibes are immaculate when we're looking at Texas Tech and Joey McGuire and the overall direction of that program. Tyler Shuck, obviously leading an offense that we expect will be very, very productive yet again. Defensively, I think that you get a floor that is not horrible, and you're not needing their ceiling to be super high on defense because of what you're able to do offensively. When you get into the way that the breakdown of the schedule goes, they do not play Oklahoma. They get Kansas State at home, and they are at Texas there on a Black Friday at the very end of the season. But, the in-state rivalry, I always put a little bit of a, consideration to that as well. So give me Joey McGuire and Texas Tech as my Big 12 dark horse.
This conference has the best chance of us hitting one of these two. I mean, this thing, because I wouldn't be surprised at all if one of the top 3 don't end up winning it. If, it doesn't work out at Oklahoma, Texas, or Kansas State, this thing is wide open. Tyler Shuck, too. I mean, he was hurt a lot. If he stays healthy, I think that's the big question for the Red Raiders, too. If they can keep him healthy, he's played really well when he's been in the system.
I don't know if you guys saw Connolly's piece on going for 4th downs. Like Texas Tech was one of the most stolen wins team last year of managing games correctly, right? Almost the polar opposite of the guy
Texas.
in
It's why
College
Texas
Station.
Tech beat Texas. Oh, yeah, Texas A&M. That's a good.
Well, yeah, but like they beat Texas because they realized like this is gonna be a high scoring game. Punting is losing. Like it'll make our loss if we lose a little bit less embarrassing, but it will decrease our odds of actually winning the ball game, which is kind of the objective in most cases, unless you're just trying to like save face for the boosters. Yeah, O-line's a little bit of a scare. I think like that. I don't think they're actually good on the O-line, but good enough.
Returning starters, but what were those starters actually worth?
Right. And then they lose Tyree Wilson. And there's a lot of confidence there that they'll be able to replace him, but that's still hard to replace a top 10 pick. What does Danny got on the screen here? How do we get graphics?
The In Soccer We Trust. I guess this is
some
Gorilla
Cross. Is this an ad read reminder?
Where did that come from? I didn't do anything. I wish I knew how to do that. In Soccer We Trust. I love it.
All right. In the Pac-12. So we said no USC, no Utah, no Oregon. Utah, of course, the 2-time conference champs. Danny, where are you going?
Washington. Give me Michael Penix coming back. 2 incredible wide receivers on the outside. He's got weapons. I think Kalen DeBoer is an excellent coach. And we saw some that what he inherited wasn't that bad from a talent perspective. It was really a culture issue that had taken place. And I think he's got the team bought in.
Disrespectful of the odds makers that Washington wasn't included
right.
with our group to be ruled out.
I agree.
Easy money. Let's go ahead and take that. Bud, where'd you go?
Look, I think Washington is probably the best team that's not on this list, but they do have, I think, the toughest schedule of all the Pac-12 teams, right? That among the contenders, obviously. So, I mean, they have to play what? At USC, their closing slate is brutal. At USC, host Utah. At Oregon State, host Washington State. And they also have the Oregon game. So I'm.
Oh, they've got the USC problem. USC has that gonna be 5-0, gonna be 6-0 because all the tough games are after your off week. Yeah,
exactly. I'm gonna go UCLA. Actually, I don't think that they're quite on that level, but I think their ceiling, if they hit it, potentially could be. I have confidence that Chip Kelly's going to get good quarterback play, whether it's freshman Dante Moore or maybe Garber's the returning backup who they seem to like, or maybe Colin Schlee looks good in the fall. I heard he didn't look great in the spring. They get Carson Steele, the running back from Ball State, who's pretty fun to watch. And I like their receiver room a lot. I think their defense could actually improve. I mean, they had a tragic situation last year at defensive coordinator, obviously, which it was sad in the recent passing there at UCLA. I think your defense could improve. But to me, offensive line is the question here. I just don't know how many teams are equipped within that league to take advantage of that. I mean, at Utah is tough, but I mean, Oregon State, Stanford, Colorado, Arizona State, USC, Cal, those D lines scare you? Not really. I mean, give me Chip Kelly to win a bunch of shootouts.
Oregon State's got a team full of chainsaws over there.
That's true. Yeah, I probably misspoke. That's going to be a brutal game.
Oregon State would be another good pick here, I think. If you wanted to if we're going to rule them out and you want to believe that they're going to continue to build, never forget the Cover 3 podcast told you that Aiden Childs might have that job by the end of the season.
I could see that. Yeah.
All right. One last one, a dark horse. If you're going to go outside of the Power 5, let's just say to make the playoff, Danny.
Yeah, I'll get it out there quick because I got to go. In honor of Tom not being back here, I'm going back to him prior to Cincinnati getting in. He's like, a group of 5 team will never get in. And it's for 2 reasons. One, I think the American, probably the perceived best, Power 6, and Mike Oresco, sorry to him because he wants to get rid of that term and not use group of 5 and all that. It's just it's not as strong, losing their 4 best brands and teams going to the Big 12 and losing them this year. The replacements aren't anywhere near as close. And Tulane plays Ole Miss. That'd be a nice win, but 1 win against Ole Miss isn't enough. And then I don't think SMU is going to go on the road and beat TCU and Oklahoma. So I don't think there's a team that's going to have a resume or perception or a high enough ranking to get in the playoff.
I think I agree with you on that for the most part. I will say I'm about 90% sure the reason why Tom does not want to do show bets anymore is because he lost 100 units to me and Danny by betting that Cincinnati would not, with no G5 team would make the
No
playoffs.
G5 team would ever.
And,
Yeah.
and that year it happened. Yeah. So that show bets have gone away now. I don't know what.
We used to have that tab in the doc, and it just doesn't get filled out anymore. He just mentioned SMU and Tulane. Those to me are the only two that you would take, right?
Oh, man.
SMU's got a pretty talented roster. Preston Stone is a sophomore quarterback that I think is going to be pretty good. Rhett Lashley has a nice track record and clearly was strong last year. So the question for SMU, even as the league is getting easier, is that the very, very dumb, overly simplistic analysis is that they beat the teams that they should beat, and that when they play the best teams on their schedule, they lose. That there has been some ceiling that SMU has not been able to really break through, despite having Sonny Dykes, despite having Chad Morris, despite having, very well respected head coaches. So, is Rhett Lashley going to be able to do that? Definitely a worthy question. So I would say either SMU or Tulane, probably.
Yeah. I mean, I think the point of like all these, the best G5 teams keep going to the P5. Like the quality of the best G5 team now is probably reduced. And at some point you're like, okay, like which of these G5 teams are actually good? Boise, I guess, is the other one. If we had to pick a third, maybe just because they could run it. Like who does Boise play non-con?
They play Washington.
Oh yeah. Okay. That's difficult. I mean, not impossible, but
Right.
certainly difficult if Taylor Green doesn't, become a better passer. He was a tremendous scrambler last year. So
watching Taylor Green quarterback was an amazing thing to do at like 1 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, that Wyoming game?
Yeah.
Like, why are we throwing the football? Like, just they have no ability. He looks like Vince Young out there running around. They show no ability to tackle him, and they're like, all right, let's trick him with some play action. It's snowing. Nobody has footing.
Yeah, Boise State also play at Washington. They've got UCF at home. They also throw Memphis on that schedule. Entertaining little slate there for the Broncos. All right, again, Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time, mailbag episode. We got some questions from the big old bag of mail. And also, we always take the live questions. Let's go ahead and get it started. We've got a question from Robert that came in when we were talking about the Big Ten dark horse. Robert asks, how are you going to spend the entire offseason saying that the Ferentz family is stealing money and then pick Iowa?
Stealing strong, I think we said like embezzling, but yeah, I agreed. Look, the reason why I'm going to pick Iowa is the same reason why they're able to run this scam. It's the defense, right? You're betting on the defense because then the offense becomes immaterial, basically.
Much love to Robert. We hope you're going to be able to make it. That's a longtime listener, always hanging out with us live. And you can follow him on Twitter at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. We will be back 11 a.m. Eastern time, youtube.com/cover3. Come and hang out live. Bud, thank you very much.
Enjoyed it. Thoughts